Every so often I like to go through the motorsport history books and take a driver who a lot of people have a lot to say about, if that makes any sense, have a look at their careers and see where it went right or, for the most part, went wrong. Because when you have a look at these drivers 20-something years later, you have a wealth of documentation to go through, and that makes sure that your opinions of the time are matched up to some sort of fact or hard statistic that can either make your opinion of someone from 1998 be backed up, or make you go, oh, actually, well, maybe that wasn't his fault. And I've put those videos onto a brand new playlist that you can find somewhere on the channel wherever the playlists are kept, so you can go through them at your leisure. I've put them in their own dedicated retrospective playlist, so you don't have to dig through so many hundred videos of story time to get to them if you just want to watch those ones. So in there is the Lazy video, the Heusinkveld video, the Corsair video, the end of Damon Hill's career, and Toyota. I think that's all of them. I only made that playlist an hour ago. Because even now, the opinions can be quite strong. It also gets you lot watching a chance to offer your own opinions on someone, and seeing your opinions get matched up with what I'm saying and the facts and stats I can provide might affirm your thinking, or make you see that you might have remembered something slightly differently. Especially the Damon Hill episode. A lot of people came out of that one with a different opinion on the guy. People are still slamming David Coulthard though. And it seems that the majority of these videos, well, in fact every video about a driver at least, concerns guys that were around in the 90s. Maybe that's because that's an era where we saw so many solid mid-grid drivers, I don't know. Maybe it's because so many people came and went in that period, or it might be because of some other thing. But yes, all the drivers covered so far came through in the 90s. Lazy started in 1989 but was mainly a 90s driver. Hill started in 1992, Coulthard in 1994 and Heusinkveld in 1996. But today we're looking at the train driver extraordinaire that is Jarno Trulli. If I was to show you the list of drivers that won the World Karting Championship, who would you expect to be on there? Schumacher? Hamilton? Senna? Prost? Okay, what if I told you that none of them are on there? You'd think they would be, given how bloody brilliant all four of those drivers have been in their careers. But no. You'd think that they'd go to something like that because the World Karting Champion would carry some weight on the way up the motorsport ladder. But again, no. Drivers that have won the World Karting Championship and then gone on to Formula 1 include Riccardo Patrese, who won it in 1974, Jan Magnussen in 1990, Jarno Trulli in 1991, Antonio Liuzzi in 2001, Guido van der Garde in 2002, Nick de Vries in 2010 and 2011, Lando Norris in 2014, and that's it. I mean, I probably shouldn't have said include because that implies a sample of winners. Those are the only ones. Trulli would then win the German Formula 3 Championship in 1996 before being signed up by Italian-backed Marcus Minardi for 1997, and he was immediately impressive. In the opening 7 rounds of the 1997 season, the rookie out-qualified his teammate Ukyo Katayama 6-1, and then Alain Prost took a punt on him when his star driver Olivier Panis broke both of his legs at Montreal. Then, after switching to a brand new team, he was impressive again. He was already on it in qualifying and got a 4th on his debut with Prost. At the Austrian Grand Prix, he qualified 3rd on the grid and was running in contention for a podium, if not the win, until his engine blew up. So this kid really did have something. Okay, kid is probably too strong of a word. He was about 22, 23 when he began in Formula 1, but still. His performance was so good that Alain Prost signed him up for 1998 to partner Panis. He beat Nakano 6-1 as well, so while those qualifying stats looked like an absolute drubbing, 1998 and 1999 were a lot closer. Trulli beat Panis 8-7 in 1998 and in 1999 they were equal. And when you translate the race results, Trulli beat Panis 3-1 in 1998 and 6-0 in 1999. Now, this is statistics taken from racingyears.com and they only include the results where both cars finished. Panis' 1998 was utterly awful and he actually finished behind Riccardo Rossit that year. What's also interesting to note is overall qualifying position. Over one lap, Trulli could often get his cars ahead of guys who had better funded and or superior equipment. In his first race with Prost at the 1997 French Grand Prix, he was 6th on the grid, ahead of Alesi's Benetton, the 2 McLarens of Hakkinen and Coulthard, and the Jordan of Heusinkveld. At the German Grand Prix, he was within a whisker of Irvine's Ferrari, in a car that didn't have quite the same amount of power, and then stuck the car in 3rd at Austria. And yes, this was a track that suited the Bridgestones more than the Goodyears, but still, Trulli was ahead of the Stewarts, who had way more money behind them. But the Prost journey didn't yield much beyond his first podium at the 1999 race at the Nürburgring, a race unique given that the entire podium was made up of drivers who were driving for a team run by multiple world champions. So in 2000, with Prost about to slip backwards, he went to a team that overperformed given their budget in 99, Jordan. And they were about to slip backwards too, it has to be said. Trulli's qualifying record against Frentzen over the 2000 season was very equal, much like it had been with Panis. In the races, Trulli was beaten for the first time when both cars finished a Grand Prix, losing 3-2 to Frentzen. However, points-wise, they were close. Frentzen was able to score 2 third places versus Trulli's best of a fourth, which allowed Frentzen to finish with 11 points over Trulli's 6 in a top 6 scores points era. In 2001 though, Trulli absolutely obliterated his 3 teammates over the course of that year in qualifying, Frentzen, Zonta and Alesi, and went on to finish a respectable 9th in the standings. During the 2001 season, his ability to slam in an epic qualifying lap to then stand still in the races holding everybody up or sliding back led to accusations of him being a hot lap merchant, but he repeatedly fought back against those accusations. But with Jordan teetering off and him having Flavio Briatore as his manager, Jarno was off to Renault, where he'd be partnered with Jenson Button for 2002. Trulli would absolutely ruin Jenson in the qualifying head-to-heads, but despite finishing ahead in the both cars finish scores, it was Jenson that finished ahead in the standings, 14 points versus 9. Jarno did have more retirements though, 9 versus 5. But because Flavio didn't like Button that much and that Jarno was one of his boys, Jarno was kept on for 2003, where he'd partner Flavio's pet project in Fernando Alonso. So things were going to get a little bit harder. As already mentioned, Alonso was Flavio's golden boy, pet project, whatever you want to call him, and Ferrari was about to reach the peak of their dominance. In 2003, Trulli and Fernando were very much equal in the qualifying head-to-head. It finished 7-6 in favour of Fernando, but it meant that Trulli was able to stay with him over 1 lap. However, in the race it was a completely different story. Fernando would win a race despite Jarno getting his first podium since 1999, and when both cars finished the race, Alonso had the edge 5-2. Teams having both cars finishing only 7 races a season. What a time to be alive that was. So for 2004, knowing how good Alonso was and how good Ferrari were going to be, Jarno stepped it up for the first few rounds of the 2004 season, to the point where they got to the Monaco Grand Prix equal on points. Both drivers had scored pretty well in the opening few rounds of the season, but despite Renault having a car built around Alonso, Trulli was keeping him honest. Both cars had scored in each of the opening 5 races to both be tied on 21 points, in a season where it was going to be a Ferrari standing on the top step of the podium, with the other one likely to be following in behind. As such, both the Renaults had a 3rd place to their name, but then came the greatest day of Trulli's life. Everybody was expecting business as usual for the Monaco Grand Prix. Schumacher in by far the best car on the grid to take pole and then romp off to an easy victory, with Barrichello in behind holding everybody up. Schumacher would then equal Senna's record of 6 wins around the Monte Carlo street circuit and go on and win however many more races in the 2004 season. Thanks for watching, see you in 2005. Even with the then 2004 qualifying rules, this was expected. That qualifying was designed to shake things up, but even still Schumacher and Ferrari were dominant. But at Monaco, it all came undone. If anybody else was going to get pole if Schumacher were to make a mistake or not have the right track conditions, it was going to be Raikkonen, Alonso or Montoya, given how rapid they were in their primes. But instead, by an unbelievable 6/10, was Trulli. A lap that Matt Bishop said is the 2nd best lap of the track after Senna's. 1 minute 13.9 was the lap, which was then the fastest anybody had ever been. In the race, Trulli utilised his ability to hold up faster traffic, which in preceding years resulted in something we now know as the Trulli Train. Jenson in 2nd was harrying the Renault for all he was worth, although not quite on the level of Mansell and Senna from 1992. Trulli also got fortunate with the bizarre incident involving the Michael and Montoya, which is yet to come in its own video, and held on to take victory by just half a second. Trulli had finally done it. In his 8th season, he'd finally scored his first Formula 1 victory, and in doing so, was now ahead of his teammate in the standings, the teammate that this team was supposedly built around. On top of this, he was the first person not called Schumacher to win a race. But after the high of Monaco, which was the absolute peak of Trulli's career, came the lowest point of his career. I've done a video about this before, but I don't think I really touched much upon this specific thing that happened. It's the French Grand Prix of 2004, the race where the Michael did his 4-stop Gigastrat to win the race from Alonso. It was also a race that showcased the differences between the Renault, the Ferrari and the Michelin and Bridgestone tyres they were on. That bit I've done before, but we're on to this bit now. Towards the end of that particular Grand Prix, Trulli was in third, so it looked like whatever happened, Renault was going to get a 1-3 or a 2-3, depending on what happened with Alonso and Schumacher. But behind Jarno was Barrichello, who was also hoping to get onto the podium, and Jarno once again did some defensive driving to make Barrichello's life a misery, because in those days, overtaking was a lot more difficult because of the lack of DRS and max hybrid deploy. On the final corner of the final lap, Barrichello launched an absolute dive bomb that got him the final podium place. Briatore was not happy about this. Trulli had gone defensive into the corner initially, but then moved back onto the racing line on the outside, and that just left Barrichello the opening with which to get through. But when you look at the onboard footage, Trulli was just avoiding not getting rogered into next week. Following this, Trulli did not score another point for Renault in that season, which seems highly suspicious, coincidental, whatever you want to call it. Alonso, meanwhile, would score points at the remaining races that he finished. 20 days after the French Grand Prix, Trulli announced that he would not be staying at Renault for 2005, despite wanting to. It wasn't about money or anything like that. Apparently it was about him not wanting to be second fiddle to Alonso and be just another Barrichello. You'll also notice that he was not present at the final few rounds of the season, because he'd been sacked. He would move to Toyota for the final 3 rounds, replacing Ricardo Zonta. Most of you will know what happened with Toyota. The long and short of it is they had an absolute ton of money sunk into Formula 1 and achieved nothing from it. Trulli went from a team that would be Constructors' Champions in 2005 to a team that wouldn't win a single Grand Prix. But he has no regrets about that. While Alonso would win 15 Grand Prix over the next 2 years, Fisichella would win just 2. But that said, Trulli did achieve some decent results for Toyota despite never winning again. 2 second places and 3 third places, as it so happens, but as Matt Bishop wrote in his recent Motorsport magazine column, his qualifying speeds were still as rapid as ever, and because he could utilise the Trulli train to his advantage, he would be making everybody else's life a misery, and could still score some decent points paying results through 2005, even going as far as to take Toyota's first ever pole at that race at Indianapolis. And his qualifying could be so good that it pissed off his teammates so much that it makes for an interesting extra story. In 2007, the 6th round of the season was going to be at Indianapolis for the final time. The Toyota car that year was awful, and it was clear that Jarno and Ralph didn't like it, and Toyota was still spending hundreds of millions for very little return. Matt Bishop, again using his Motorsport magazine column as the reference here, was the editor of F1 magazine at the time, and thought it would be a fun idea to have a fashion photographer take some pictures of the drivers for F1 Racing magazine. This was to be done in the hours after qualifying. Ralph had just been beaten in qualifying by Jarno yet again. For the 2007 season, it was now 6-0 in favour of the Italian, and Ralph was getting suitably annoyed. When he came into the makeshift studio, he demanded that Bishop's writers write favourable things about him or he wouldn't do the shoot. Bishop simply said, "I can't guarantee you positive coverage just because you stood still for a few minutes." It got heated and Ralph stomped off. When Bishop went to go and get Jarno for his photo shoot, Jarno had already been told the story of what had happened with Ralph and Matt in that little photo booth that he'd set up. When Bishop told Jarno the story from his point of view, Jarno just burst into hysterics. At the end of the 2007 season, Trulli's qualifying record against Ralph over the 3 seasons they had together stood at 35-17, although Trulli would only beat Ralph in the point standings once. That was 2007. Things would taper off though for Trulli thereafter due to Toyota being Toyota and his form struggling a bit over the next few years. He was able to score a few more podiums on his way to 8th place in 2009, but following Toyota's withdrawal at the end of that year due to the global economic recession, he was going to have to find somewhere else to race. That team would be Lotus, later Caterham, and it would also be the only time that Trulli lost a qualifying head-to-head against a teammate. The Reddit user Lucius Azure made this very helpful graph to show you how good Trulli was at qualifying. 6-1 versus Katayama and Nakano in 1997, 15-8 versus Panis over 2 years at Prost, 18-9 versus Frentzen before he was replaced by Zonta, who was done in 4-0, and then 4-1 against the Lazy. Button was beaten 12-5 at Renault before only just beating Alonso. Ralph was decimated before Glock came in and got rinsed 25-8. Kovalainen is the only teammate that gave Trulli back what he'd given everybody else over 1 lap. What would be interesting to see is race finish positions versus qualifying positions, relative to those qualifying positions. Because if he's putting in really good qualifying laps and then dropping back through the field in the race and then keeping loads of people behind him, then the accusations of him being a hot lap merchant are, well, warranted, if that's the operative term to use. Really, the only stats I can give you are versus teammates when both cars are finished, because reliability on one car can scupper a driver here and there. He beat his teammates in 97, 98, 99, 2001, 2002, 2004, 2005, 2007 and 2008. It wasn't until he went to Lotus that he was being beaten regularly. So maybe he's not such a hot lap merchant after all, but I guess it's how you dissect the statistics. I can only really give you anecdotal recollections, to be honest. I do remember Trulli being fast as hell in qualifying, but his race pace versus those around him wasn't as good. While the other drivers might lose, say, 2 seconds versus their qualifying times with fuel and so on, Trulli would lose a little bit more, 2.3 maybe. And with it being so difficult to overtake and fuel loads and strategy being the deciding factor in getting any overtakes done, a Trulli train with Jarno sitting there with everybody else trying to get by was funny to watch. But the gap to the car ahead of Jarno getting bigger and bigger? Not so. I wouldn't say that he was a bad driver, I'd say that he didn't have that balance. It's all well and good to be fast over one lap, but if you can't sustain it, then you're probably not going to finish as high as you should. It makes you wonder then that if it hadn't been Monaco in 2004 but another track instead, Button would have probably overtaken him. But then he's got one more race victory than we'll ever have, unless there is a Formula 1 Grand Prix winner watching this video, but also you don't get to do over 300 races in a career if you're not doing something right. But I'd like to know what you think down in the designated comment submission zone underneath this video. So then, a look at the career of one Jarno Trulli and if he really was a hot lap merchant. If this has given you some insight into a much liked driver of the past, then do leave this video a like so I know I've done a good job, and for more like this get subscribed with the bell on so you never miss out on any future videos. Massive thanks as ever to the fine bunch of lads over at Patreon for the continued support, and if you want to help keep things running around here, then a link to Patreon is in the description, along with links to Discord, socials and other bits and pieces you might want or need to know. Or there's super thanks there if you just want to buy me a coffee, and memberships too if you want to be more overt with your support. And spam Roberto Moreno emojis in chat. So until next time, I've been Millward, have a great day wherever you are, and goodbye.